Welcome to Dark Character Profiler. Take a deep dive into the background and personalities of villains from books, video games, manga, and comics. Psychological analysis of some of the most deviant and heinous characters of all time. Now, here's Fulcrum.
Every story has a villain, but not every villain is simple. Welcome to Dark Character Profiler, the podcast where we examine fictional characters through psychology, trauma, and moral fracture. Here, we go beyond good and evil to ask harder questions. What shaped them? What broke them? And at what point does survival become monstrosity? I'm your host, Fulcrum. Let's begin.
Dark Character Profile.
Listener discretion is advised. This episode includes discussions of severe psychological trauma, violence, abuse, and exploitation. All analysis is presented for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute professional diagnosis, psychological treatment, or medical advice. The material is examined analytically and without glorification, but it may still be distressing. If you need to pause, skip, or step away, please do so.
Dark Character Profile.
I thought I knew Cruella de Vil. Like most people, my image of her was shaped by what the screen gave me. Exaggerated, dramatic, almost theatrical. A villain designed to be memorable, not necessarily real. Someone whose cruelty felt heightened, stylized, distant. Then I read Dottie Smith's The 101 Dalmatians, and the Cruella that I found there wasn't theatrical at all. She was thin in a way that felt depleted rather than elegant. Her skin was described as pale and wasted. Her hair chaotic rather than styled. Her perfume layered so heavily it seemed to announce her before she entered a room. And her eyes. Smith lingers on her eyes. Black, glittering, feverish. Eyes that don't soften, don't warm, don't invite. Eyes that assess. I remember realizing, as I read, that this wasn't a villain written for spectacle. It was a portrait, a psychological one. This Cruella didn't feel larger than life. She felt hollowed out by it. Today, I'm opening the original case file, not the Cruella we've been taught to enjoy, but the Cruella Dottie Smith actually wrote. Because once you remove the theatrics, what you're left with isn't madness. It's entitlement without breaks. Background information. Cruella enters Smith's story already formed. There is no slow descent into cruelty, no gradual erosion of morality. She appears fully intact, already wealthy, already dominant, already unbothered by social limits. She is born into privilege and marries into further wealth. Her husband exists in the narrative almost entirely as a function rather than a person. He is a furrier, a resource, not a partner, not a presence. His identity is defined by what he provides, and Cruella consumes that provision rapidly. Money for her isn't stability or security, it's fuel. Something to be burned through in service of desire, status, and indulgence. Smith makes it clear that Cruella spends recklessly, impulsively, without foresight, but this isn't naivete, it's expectation. She behaves as though resources are infinite because in her experience, they always have been. What stands out most in her background isn't excess, but immunity. Cruella appears to have lived her entire life without meaningful resistance, without consequences that stick, without anyone capable of saying no and having it matter. Psychologically, that absence is formative. Trauma and developmental history. When I started looking for trauma in Cruella's history, I kept coming up empty. There's no defining loss, no formative wound, no betrayal that hardens her worldview. And that absence matters more than it might seem at first. Cruella's psychology isn't shaped by suffering. It's shaped by never needing to adapt. She grows up in an environment where desire is rewarded, indulgence is normalized, and dominance is reinforced. Over time, this teaches a dangerous internal rule. Wanting something is reason enough to have it. Resistance isn't feedback, it's an offense. In clinical terms, this creates a distorted moral development. Empathy never becomes necessary. Accountability never becomes internalized. Cruella doesn't learn how to regulate desire because desire has never been regulated for her. This is not trauma in the traditional sense, but psychologically, it produces something just as rigid, a personality that has never been required to bend. Mental state examination. If Cruella were sitting across from me in a clinical setting, I wouldn't expect chaos or confusion. I would expect clarity. She would be alert, articulate, and irritable, easily bored, quick to dismiss. Her speech would likely be sharp and cutting, especially when challenged. Her thought process would be coherent and goal-directed, but notably shallow, not because she lacks intelligence, but because she lacks reflection. There is no evidence of psychosis here, no hallucinations, no delusions. Cruella's reality testing is intact. She understands the world perfectly well. She simply rejects its constraints. What's most striking is her affect. Cruella doesn't linger in emotion. Feelings spike and collapse quickly. Frustration becomes rage. Desire becomes fixation. And once an outcome is achieved, the emotional residue vanishes. She does not sit with guilt because guilt never registers as relevant. Fulcrum's personality breakdown, the hurricane scale. Before I break Cruella down, here's a reminder of how this scale works. The hurricane scale doesn't ask whether a trait exists. Everyone has these traits. It measures how much control that trait has over behavior. Category 1 is background noise. Category 5 is a system-level storm. Imagination and openness. Category 2. Cruella values aesthetics, not exploration. Her interest in beauty is transactional. Fashion as status, not expression. Creativity serves identity, not insight. Control and discipline. Category 4. Cruella requires control over people, outcomes, and environments. When control is maintained, she is composed. When it slips, escalation is immediate. This isn't disorganization, it's rigidity. Social energy, category 4. She thrives in social spaces where she dominates attention. This is not connection, it's occupation. People exist as mirrors, not companions. Compassion and cooperation, category 1. Empathy barely registers. Cooperation exists only when it serves her goals. Suffering is irrelevant unless it inconveniences her. Unpredictability, category 4 to category 5. Her emotional shifts are sudden and severe. Charm becomes fury without warning. This volatility is not accidental. It destabilizes others and preserves her dominance. Cruella doesn't lose control, she deploys it. Moral beliefs. Cruella does not operate within a moral framework that weighs right and wrong. Instead, her ethics are logistical. If something advances her desire, it is justified. If it obstructs her, it is offensive. Moral reasoning never enters the equation. This isn't ignorance. Cruella understands social rules perfectly well. She simply doesn't accept them as binding. Her cruelty is not fueled by hatred. It's fueled by indifference. Interpersonal relationships. Cruella's relationships aren't relationships in the emotional sense. They're positions. People are slotted into roles based on utility, proximity, and compliance. What's striking isn't how cruel she is to others, but how little she seems to register them as autonomous beings. Let's start with her husband. Cruella's marriage is not a partnership, it's an acquisition. He exists as infrastructure, someone whose profession gives her access to materials, status, and validation. There's no evidence of emotional attachment, intimacy, or mutual reliance. When resources dwindle, affection does not compensate. The relationship collapses because psychologically there was never anything holding it together in the first place. This tells us something critical. Cruella does not bond through attachment. She bonds through access. Jasper and Horace are similar. They aren't companions. They're extensions of her will. Their value lies in obedience and proximity, not loyalty or shared experience. When they hesitate, she doesn't negotiate. She escalates. Their fear isn't accidental. It stabilizes the hierarchy. What's missing from all these relationships is reciprocity. Cruella never adapts to others. Others adapt to her. In contrast, when we look at normal interpersonal functioning, even domineering individuals still experience moments of emotional calibration, compromise, repair, mutual influence. Cruella does not. She does not repair ruptures because she doesn't recognize them as ruptures. Discomfort in others is not feedback, it's resistance. This isn't social incompetence, it's deliberate relational asymmetry. Historical parallels. When comparing Cruella to historical figures, what matters isn't surface cruelty, it's structural insulation. Elizabeth Bathory wasn't terrifying because she was violent. She was terrifying because her social position delayed consequences. Privilege created psychological distance between action and accountability. Over time, that distance eroded restraint. Cruella operates in the same psychological space, not hidden from society, but buffered by wealth, reputation, and expectation. Imelda Marcos offers a different parallel. Her excess wasn't simply indulgent, it was identity reinforcing. Consumption becomes proof of worth. Losing access to that consumption felt like annihilation. Cruella's fixation on fur operates similarly. It isn't just desire, it's validation. The object confirms her superiority. Jean-Antoinette Poisson illustrates something subtler. The way charm, refinement, and status can mask coercion. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it smiles. Cruella understands this instinctively. Her dominance isn't always loud, but it is absolute. What unites these figures isn't cruelty alone. It's entitlement protected by environment. Cruella doesn't feel monstrous to herself because the world has rarely contradicted her.
And now, the final analysis. But first, just a little house cleaning.
Before we examine the crimes and potential diagnoses, a brief reminder. This analysis is presented for educational and entertainment purposes only.
Dark character profile.
Criminal behavior. Cruella de Vil's criminal behavior is not speculative or implied. It is clear, intentional, and multi-layered. First, and most obviously, Cruella conspires to commit mass animal theft. She knowingly plans the abduction of over 100 Dalmatian puppies, fully aware that they belong to private citizens and that their removal constitutes criminal theft. This is not a crime of opportunity. It is deliberate, organized, and premeditated. Second, she contracts and directs accomplices Jasper and Horace to carry out these acts on her behalf. This establishes criminal conspiracy. She provides instruction, pressure, and incentive while insulating herself from direct involvement. Psychologically, this distance is important. It allows her to maintain a self-image separate from the physical act while still exercising total control over its execution. Third, and most critically, Cruella's intent does not end with theft. She explicitly plans to kill the puppies for the purpose of manufacturing fur garments. This elevates her behavior beyond property crime into premeditated animal cruelty on a mass scale. The killing is not incidental, it is the goal. The animals' lives are reduced to raw material. Fourth, Cruella demonstrates coercive control and intimidation. Jasper and Horace are not willing participants. They operate under threat, fear, and emotional pressure. Her treatment of them includes verbal abuse, intimidation, and implied consequences for failure. This establishes a pattern of psychological abuse and coercion within her criminal conduct. Fifth, Cruella repeatedly shows reckless disregard for harm beyond her immediate objective. She endangers animals, civilians, and even her own accomplices through escalating demands, lack of concern for consequences, and fixation on outcome over safety. Risk is not miscalculated, it is dismissed. What makes these crimes psychologically significant is not their novelty, but their instrumental nature. Cruella does not commit violence in anger. She commits it as a means to an end. She does not derive pleasure from suffering itself, but she does not recognize suffering as a reason to stop. Harm is acceptable collateral. Legality is irrelevant. Morality never enters the equation. This places her firmly in the category of instrumental offenders, individuals who view crime as a tool rather than an emotional release. The absence of remorse is not explosive or dramatic. It is quiet, efficient, final. And that quietness is precisely what makes her criminal profile so disturbing. Psychological testing. If Cruella underwent psychological testing, the results would be stark. On empathy measures, we'd likely see severe deficits in affective empathy, the ability to emotionally resonate with others. Cognitive empathy, however, would likely remain intact. She understands what people feel, she simply doesn't care. This distinction explains much of her behavior. She anticipates reactions accurately but uses the knowledge strategically rather than compassionately. Narcissistic inventories would show elevation in entitlement, grandiosity, and exploitative tendencies. These aren't abstract traits. They manifest as expectations of compliance, admiration, access. Moral reasoning assessments would likely place her in a self-referential stage. Decisions are evaluated based on personal benefit rather than principle or consequence. Impulse control testing would show situational restraint. When patience benefits her, she waits. When it doesn't, restraint dissolves. This is not dysregulation, it's conditional control. DSM-5 TR Diagnostic Breakdown. Narcissistic personality disorder is often misunderstood, so it's important to slow this down. At its core, NPD is not vanity. It's identity fragility protected by entitlement. Cruella meets well beyond the minimum diagnostic threshold. Her grandiosity is not performative, it's foundational. She believes she is inherently deserving of special treatment. She expects admiration, not as reward, but as baseline. Her exploitation of others is consistent and unapologetic. People are used, discarded, and coerced without remorse. Empathy is not merely low, it is functionally absent when it conflicts with desire. Antisocial traits appear, but they lack the developmental history required for full ASPD. She does not show early behavioral conduct disorder or pervasive lawbreaking across contexts. Her antisociality is selective, not global. Histrionic features also exist. Dramatic presentation, theatrical, but they support the narcissistic core rather than replacing it. Cruella is not impulsively destructive. She is structurally self-centered. Final impressions. When I close Cruella de Vil's file, I don't feel pity, and that's important. Cruella isn't tragic. She isn't fractured. She isn't reacting to pain. She is the product of a world that never required her to look inward. Her danger doesn't come from emotional chaos. It comes from uncertainty, from the belief that wanting something makes pursuit righteous, from a life spent insulated from resistance. Cruella forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Some villains are not broken by suffering. They are shaped by permission. And that kind of villain doesn't unravel. It persists.
Dark Character Profiler.
Dark Character Profiler is produced and edited by Fulcrum under Dark Fulcrum Media. If you enjoyed this episode, consider following the show or sharing it with someone who loves psychology, storytelling, and morally complex characters. You can find links, references, and related material in the show notes. Until next time, remember, the most terrifying monsters are rarely born. They're shaped.
Thank you for listening to Dark Character Profiler with Fulcrum. Listen every other Tuesday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Podcasts. Humanity was not meant to live this way. Society is left to the mercy of murderers and cutthroats. Hear Paige Zaplin Dam's epic tale brought to life in an audiobook. For years, Slade had felt secure in the forest. I am from simple, humble beginnings. I was raised in the Ironwood by an ogress, an Anaral. He saw immediately that she was beyond a healer's aid. Even a skilled witch could not help her recover from losing so much blood. Mother? Slade thought he wanted revenge. Instead, he got redemption. A kingdom of ash and steam, The Ogress's Son, a dystopian neo-dark age fantasy, narrated by Rich Frazier. Now available on iTunes and Audible. I promise you I will find whoever did this and avenge you, Mother.